In American history, few decades shine as brightly or feel as contradictory as the 1920s. Often called the Roaring Twenties, this era began with hope and optimism as the nation emerged from the shadow of World War I. Factories were running again, cities were growing, and many believed a new age of opportunity had arrived. This was a time when the pace of life accelerated rapidly. Innovations reshaped daily routines, cultural attitudes shifted, and millions felt energized by the promise of modernity. But beneath the excitement, tensions were already forming. Economic, social, and cultural forces quietly building toward major changes. The Roaring Twenties was not simply a chapter in history, it was a turning point. A moment when the United States redefined what progress, freedom, and prosperity meant in a rapidly changing world.
To understand the energy of the 1920s, we must begin with the economy. After the hardships of the war, the United States entered a period of extraordinary growth. New technologies and production methods transformed industries across the nation. One of the biggest breakthroughs was mass production. Assembly line manufacturing, most famously used in automobile factories, allowed goods to be produced faster and at lower cost. Suddenly, products like cars, radios, and household appliances were no longer rare luxuries. They became part of everyday life. As consumer goods spread, so did consumer credit. For the first time, many families could buy items on installment plans, paying a little each month. This new financial freedom fueled a culture of spending and helped businesses expand even more. Meanwhile, the stock market soared. Investing became a national fascination. Magazines, newspapers, and everyday conversations centered on the belief that the market would keep rising forever. Many people, from wealthy investors to ordinary workers, bought shares with borrowed money, convinced that prosperity had no limits. The boom created the image of a nation growing richer by the day, and in many ways it was true. Cities expanded, wages rose, and new industries flourished. But this rapid growth also masked deeper weaknesses that would not stay hidden for long.
If the economy reshaped the structure of society, culture reshaped its identity. The 1920s witnessed the rise of new art forms, new attitudes, and new ways of living that defined a generation. At the heart of the cultural explosion was jazz, a musical style that symbolized creativity, expression, and movement. Jazz clubs filled with energy, drawing crowds eager for entertainment and new experiences. Dance halls became social hubs where people gathered to enjoy music and celebrate life. In this decade, women's roles evolved dramatically. After gaining the right to vote in 1920, many women embraced newfound independence. The image of the flapper emerged. Young women who wore modern fashion enjoyed social freedom and challenged traditional expectations. Their confidence became a visible sign of cultural change. Technology also reshaped entertainment. Radio brought news, sports, and music directly into homes, connecting communities in ways never seen before. Cinema flourished as theaters showcased silent films and, later in the decade, movies with sound. Millions flocked to watch stories brought to life on the screen, making film a central part of American culture. At the same time, literature, art, and intellectual movements flourished. Writers explored themes of modern life, identity, and the search for meaning in a rapidly changing world. The Roaring Twenties was not only a decade of wealth, it was a decade of reinvention. Despite its glamour, the 1920s carried a quieter, more complicated story. Not everyone shared in the prosperity, and even as progress accelerated, tensions grew in ways that shaped the future. One of the defining challenges of the decade was prohibition, a federal law restricting the production and sale of alcohol. While it was meant to encourage social improvement, the law had unintended consequences. Many people simply continued drinking in private spaces, and underground networks emerged to supply alcohol discreetly. These shifts reflected how laws and lifestyles sometimes conflicted, creating social friction. Economic inequality also widened. While cities flourished, many farmers and laborers struggled. Agricultural prices fell, rural communities faced financial hardship, and the gap between urban prosperity and rural reality became more pronounced. Immigrant laborers contributed significantly to industrial growth, yet many faced difficult conditions and limited opportunities. Their experiences highlighted the uneven distribution of wealth even during a time of national expansion. And throughout the decade, the economy's apparent strength hid structural weaknesses. Overproduction, rising personal debt, and widespread speculation in the stock market. The Roaring Twenties sparkled on the surface, but beneath it, pressure continued to build.
As the 1920s approached their final years, the first cracks in the foundation began to appear. Factories produced more goods than consumers could buy. Warehouses filled with unsold products. Businesses slowed hiring, and some industries began to shrink. The stock market, once seen as a path to easy wealth, grew increasingly unstable. Prices no longer reflected the actual value of companies, yet many investors continued buying shares, confident the upward trend would continue indefinitely. Newspaper headlines began reporting concerns about the economy. Financial experts issued warnings, though few believed a major downturn was possible. After years of optimism, the idea of economic trouble felt distant and unreal. At banks, deposits weakened, and some people grew cautious about their finances. A sense of uncertainty quietly settled across the country, even as life on the surface continued with familiar energy. By the decade's end, the signs were clear. The prosperity of the Roaring Twenties rested on an unstable foundation. The dramatic events that followed in 1929 would forever transform how Americans viewed the decade that came before.
Looking back, the Roaring Twenties stands as one of the most influential periods in American history. It was a decade of bold innovation, cultural transformation, and economic expansion. It reshaped how people lived, worked, and expressed themselves. The decade's cultural achievements, its music, fashion, films, and literature, continue to inspire generations. The evolution of women's roles and the rise of modern entertainment helped create the foundation of contemporary American society. At the same time, the challenges of the 1920s serve as an important reminder. Rapid growth without stability can lead to serious consequences. The optimism of the era, while powerful, could not prevent deeper problems from emerging. The Roaring Twenties was a decade of contrast, bright, dynamic, and full of possibility, yet also marked by tension and imbalance. It remains a powerful illustration of how progress and vulnerability can exist side by side. And even today, the lessons of the 1920s continue to shape how we understand economic cycles, cultural change, and the complex relationship between prosperity and stability.